Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson's right-hand man was caught defying the country's lockdown. Now the public is calling for his resignation. Here's Simon Bates with this week's London Calling.
Here's to the good old days when Britain's current Prime Minister Boris Johnson could wriggle out of any potential embarrassment with a quip or just a bit of charm. But those days are over, because Mr. Johnson has been humiliated. He's come up against a problem that can't just be laughed off this time, and that problem is a man called Dominic Cummings, someone who seems to hold more influence than even Mr. Johnson himself. A bit like Steve Bannon, but without the charm. A real power behind the throne who's now in deep trouble because Mr. Cummings has been forced to admit that at the height of the virus panic, he drove 250 miles with his wife and small son to a family home in the north of England. His wife was suffering from the virus, and he worried that he might catch it, in which case who would look after the child? The problem is that Britain was in a state of lockdown. Stay home, save lives, we were urged by the Prime Minister, and we did. As a result, grandparents were practically incarcerated, people couldn't visit sick relatives, and families couldn't even attend funerals. It's been pretty grim, and it's impossible to overstate the surge of pure anger and hatred here, as people have tried to come to terms with Mr. Cummings' actions. He held a press conference, not just anywhere, but in the Downing Street Rose Garden, where he flatly denied breaking the letter or even the spirit of the emergency legislation, although 71% of the British public think he did. They see Mr. Cummings as arrogant, with one rule for him and another for anybody else. Many legislators have called on him to step down, and one very junior minister even walked out of the government in protest. But with a humiliated Prime Minister's support, it's very unlikely that the unelected Mr. Cummings will resign. That's London Calling for today. This is Simon Bates for CBS News in Devon.